Ever feel like you're doing everything right, but still feel stuck? The career, the house, the script we followed, yet something's missing. Everyone said we made it. We realized we'd been climbing someone else's ladder. That realization sparked a journey toward liberation, toward Africa, toward intention. We haven't left yet, but the shift has already begun. Liberation doesn't start with a move. It starts the moment you stop asking permission. Hi, I'm Simone, and welcome back to our liberation journey, where we share how we are building location-independent businesses, investing on the continent of Africa, as well as planning for our family's relocation to South Africa. So as you can see, particularly if you are not joining us for the first time, by myself. I do not have my significant other with me at this time, but I did want to first say Happy New Year to everyone. I hope that you all had a wonderful, joy-filled, festive season, as it's often referred to in South Africa. Luke is not currently with me. This past month has been a little bit of a challenge from a family perspective. Anytime you have sudden illness and death within the family, it's a challenge. But particularly, this time of the year when, everyone is focused on spending time with their family, just enjoying the time that you have together. Dealing with that particular type of challenge during this season has an added layer of difficulty. So right now I am by myself, but I did want to just take a few moments to, again, wish everyone a wonderful Happy New Year and share a few things with respect to where we are and what we plan as far as for this year. Because full transparency, we do intend to relocate by the end of this year. So there's a lot that we need to do in order to properly prepare. And we also want to, stay true to our mission to really share how we are going through this journey as we are going through the journey. So I am going to just share a few points, particularly about our investment in Johannesburg, and get into some of those details. But again, just want to say Happy New Year to everyone, and keep our family lifted up in prayer as we, continue to navigate, this season. We decided to invest in 2 units in Johannesburg. So just to recap, for those who may have not watched our previous videos, in November of, actually now 2024, we traveled to Johannesburg for a real estate tour. During that tour, we were introduced to 2 development projects in Johannesburg. One is in Rosebank, and the other is in Sandton. So the reason why those 2 particular developments stood out to us is, one, our goal as far as our initial investment in real estate in South Africa is geared towards just that, an investment from an income generating standpoint. I think it's one of the things that I always try to impress upon people who ask me or ask us about, um, our decision to invest in real estate, it's always important to be clear about what your goals and objectives are, um, because that will guide the decision making process as to what types of properties you should be looking at, what types of neighborhoods you should be looking at, what types of developments. All of those different aspects are important to have a clear understanding as to what is the purpose of this particular investment that you're looking to make. It's much different if you are looking to purchase a home as your, primary residence where you're going to live, or even a residence where you may spend part of your time. So that type of property is going to be much different compared to if you're maybe looking to invest in a property that can be used for like long-term rentals. Even, from a long-term versus short-term rental, there are particular types of units that are more conducive to long-term, and vice versa. There are certain units that have a much higher appeal to short-term rental markets. So, those things are important to be as crystal clear as you can be before jumping into any type of investment when it comes to real estate. So for us, our primary goal, objective was to start to build a portfolio of real estate that would generate income, that would provide us with a nice kind of baseline stream of income outside of just what we do professionally, to support, our family. Because as mentioned, we are planning to relocate to South Africa. So having, a nice solid foundation of a steady income that isn't tied to us, working. So that was our goal, and so when we were on the tour, although we did look at a lot of places that are, potential options for us to live and reside, our primary focus for our initial investment is from a income generation standpoint. So when we came across the units that were in Rosebank and Sandton, those particular areas, one, there's a strong appeal there for the short-term rental market. Rosebank, reminded us a lot of, so we're from the US, New Jersey specifically, but we also spent a lot of time. We lived in New York City for a while, in Brooklyn more specifically. So if you're familiar with New York City, Rosebank really reminded us of like Soho area, or if you're from like the northern Jersey area, it reminded us of like Hoboken or like downtown Jersey City, where, it's a lot of hustle and bustle. There's a lot of, restaurants, shopping, people that are just out and about walking around. So it's a very walkable area. And even from watching content prior to going on the tour, there was a lot of conversation around Rosebank and its appeal, and how a lot of people like to, hang out in Rosebank, and a lot of people who come to Johannesburg, for those kind of short-term rental stays, they tend to like to, stay in Rosebank. So understanding that, and also seeing it, for ourselves and spending time, walking around the different areas. We saw, for ourselves that it definitely has an appeal when it comes to short-term rentals. So that was um, part of the reason why we decided to invest in a unit in Rosebank. And the same with Sandton. The project in Sandton is not that far from. Well, let me back up. So these projects are actually under construction. The Rosebank one is actually further along. The first phase of it actually is already open, and people are already occupying it. The unit that we purchased is due to be ready for transfer actually next month. So that one is pretty much for the most part almost complete. The Santon project, that just literally started to like break ground as far as starting the actual building process late, maybe a month or so ago. So that project is still very early in the process. So we purchased these units before they were even, complete. So that's one thing also to keep in mind when purchasing, depending on, again, what your goals are from a long-term appreciation value standpoint. You definitely do have a little bit of a higher kind of slope in that increase when you're able to, purchase a unit that's still in the beginning phases of development versus buying into an already established development. Not to say that buying into an established development doesn't have that appreciation value. It's just the slope of that increase can be a bit different when you're buying into an already established development
So, what
versus
are some of
something
the
that is
lessons that
still
we
in the
learned
process
during the
of being
process
developed
of
and
purchasing the
early
2 units in
early in those
Johannesburg?
phases.
All
So
right,
the
so
the
lesson one,
Santon
I would say, is
project also was
it
appealing from a
may be
short-term
best
rental standpoint,
to
just because of
take it one
the
property at a
businesses
time.
that are in there.
Again,
It's
because
a hub
we
where
were
there are a
on the
lot
real
of
estate tour,
professionals
we
that
were
come in and
introduced to
out.
both
Also from like
property
government officials
during that
standpoint,
tour, and ultimately
there's
decided that we
embassies
wanted
in
to
that
invest in
area.
both
So there's a lot of people
neighborhoods,
that
both Sandton
come
and
in and out
Rosebank.
um,
So we
and
started the
stay
process,
in
reserved the
Santon.
units all at the
Um,
same time.
so that also
And I will say
we
that that
recognized,
was
and why
a
we
bit overwhelming at
ultimately
times,
decided to
keeping
invest in a unit
things
in
straight,
Santon
receiving
as well.
correspondences at the same time, making sure that, okay, this is for the Rosebank versus the Sandton project. So doing those together all at the same exact time, I would certainly say, particularly for your first time investing in a foreign market, do it one property at a time. I mean, we got through it, we did it, but I will be completely transparent in saying that it did get a bit overwhelming. Um, Reviewing both properties from a contractual standpoint at the same time, um, and doing that process, it definitely it definitely got a bit overwhelming, to say the least. But nonetheless, we were able to successfully go through the process of, you know, reviewing the contracts, finalizing the contracts, making adjustments to the contracts. Just as I mentioned, the Rosebank property, because it is essentially fully completed and ready for transfer, that property is fully paid for. Actually, about 2 weeks ago, I mailed the documentation required to complete the transfer process, which is at this point scheduled to be fully complete next month. So we will certainly keep you updated and show you the process as far as, receiving the property, getting it set up for short-term rentals, because I think that also will help to demystify the process. Because as you know, we don't live in Johannesburg, so we won't be initially managing the units. So I think it's helpful to allow you to kind of see how we go about that process, and what it looks like and what the options are with respect to management of a foreign investment. So that's lesson one. Two, when we were first introduced to the properties and showing us what units were available, pricing, all of that, we did end up signing reservation agreements, which is not the same thing as a contract. So the reservation essentially is saying that, I intend to purchase this property, which in essence has the developer not be able to, sell it to another person while you're, going through the process of reviewing the formalized contract. And there is a fee that you pay, but the fee is refundable if you, for whatever reason, decide that you don't want to move forward and, ultimately purchase the property. You can get your reservation fee back. But I would say that in an ideal scenario, it would be best, in my opinion, to first have a legal team in place that can help you understand all of the elements of a contract, um, you know, walk you through all of the aspects that you should be looking at when ultimately deciding whether this project aligns with what your goals and objectives are. Um, and again, we didn't sign an actual formalized contract, legally binding us to purchase the property, but we did sign a reservation agreement before having, a formalized legal team review everything. So I would say, in hindsight, because you do feel a little bit of more added pressure. I'll just put it that way. When you've already kind of signed a reservation and then you're now, going through the legal process as far as reviewing the contract, making any kind of adjustments to it, and, kind of going back and forth with that negotiation process. Um, I think it just makes it a little bit less kind of feeling pressure or feeling like, you have to, not that you have to move forward, but it just really eases things a little bit if you've already, um, secured your legal team, gotten that initial kind of legal advice as to what elements of the contract you should be, maybe negotiating, understanding all of the different aspects of how the process works, what to expect. Because again, this is the first time we're investing in real estate in South Africa. And although there are similarities with purchasing a property in the US, there are some distinct differences as well. So just being kind of aware of all of those different aspects before, signing anything, I think is probably the best approach. So that's, lesson number two. Um, And then also, what we learned during this process is all of the different steps you have to take in order to, um, from a financial standpoint, purchasing an investment in a different country, in a different currency. There are certainly, obviously, many steps that you have to take in order to do it properly. Um, so if anyone tells you that, hey, I have this opportunity and all you got to do is take your money and send it here and all is good, that is not a legitimate transaction. Okay? Let me repeat that again. If anyone, and this, I wouldn't even say this is just specific to South Africa. I would say from any, foreign country, if someone just says, oh, you just need to send me this money and, everything is all good to go, and there's not a bunch of steps in between that, it's probably not a legitimate transaction, okay? Because there are steps um, that you absolutely should be taking. Um, one, to protect yourself and your money, and two, to make sure that everything is being recorded properly from a tax standpoint as well. Because one thing you don't want to end up is on the taxman's list for not doing things in a proper way and recording things as far as a transaction in a proper way. So there are several steps that you have to take in order to properly, move funds from the U.S. to South Africa, convert them from U.S. dollars into rands, and then, um, move those funds to the purchase of a property. So there are multiple steps that have to be taken. Um, and so understanding and knowing all of those steps prior to would have been helpful. But I think also one of the things that I always tell people is that, you don't get comfortable with doing a thing until you start doing a thing. So there is some aspect and element of kind of learning as you go along. Um, but you want to do it in a way where you are at least being advised by professionals who know what they're doing, so that they can help you along that process as you are learning all the different steps and ways in which you have to go about purchasing a property. Um, so yeah, those are the three biggest lessons that we learned. What are some of the very important steps that you should be aware of if you are considering purchasing real estate in South Africa? First and foremost, absolutely the first, and this is with any real estate transaction, quite frankly, whether it's in the US or in another country, is having
vetted legal advice, and specifically legal advice from someone who is well versed in real estate transactions. So I was fortunate enough to have already been connected, as I mentioned in a previous um, episode, with Ashley from Ashley in Africa. And she recommended a legal team that specifically focuses on real estate transactions. And so I used their services, and during the process as far as our Johannesburg transactions, and currently are using their services as it relates to the property that we are looking to purchase in Durban as well. So that is absolutely vitally important. It should be step one, because again, it's very important for you to understand all of the different aspects, the elements, not only of just reviewing a contract, but just understanding all of the aspects that you should be, considering when buying a property. So that's absolutely number one. Two, again, because these particular purchases are for income generation from an investment standpoint, we wanted to be able to purchase the properties under a business entity. And so, one thing to be aware of in South Africa is that yes, you can buy a property without having a long term residence in South Africa, or a long term visa. As an individual, you can do that. But also, if you want to do it through a business entity, you do have to establish a business entity in South Africa. In other words, if you have a business in the US, and let's say the funds that you're using to purchase the property is through that particular business entity that you have in the US, you can't just purchase the property under your US business entity. You have to establish a business entity within South Africa in order to have that properly listed under the business name, or purchased under the business name. So that was the next step that we went through after we got connected with the legal team, and discussed what our goals were, what we were looking to do with the purchases. And so they helped us establish a business entity in South Africa in order to allow us to be able to purchase the units under that specific business entity. The next thing that you definitely want to be aware of, and I alluded to it in the previous segment, was about the financial transaction, as far as the wiring of money, the transfer of funds from the US to South Africa. So one of the things that you should do and should be aware of is establishing an account that can receive your money in US dollars from the US into South Africa. And as it was explained to me, the importance of doing that particular step is any money that you are transferring, particularly large sums of money that you're transferring from the US into South Africa, that needs to be registered with SARS, which is the US version of the IRS. And so it's important to establish a proper account that can receive the funds from the US, and then those funds are then converted into rands. Once those funds are converted into rands, then you can then forward that money
to the designated recipient for the developer that you're purchasing from. So the money actually doesn't go directly to the developer. So that's, similar to, um, you know, the United States, where we call it like an escrow account, where, if you're purchasing a property, it's first put into an escrow account before it's actually then given to, the seller, or in this case, the developer. So it's similar in South Africa, where there's an intermediary that holds the funds until the transaction is fully complete before it actually goes to the seller. So that's a similar kind of process between the U.S. and South Africa. But it's important to understand that you don't necessarily you shouldn't be, if somebody's telling you to wire money directly from you to a seller, that's absolutely incorrect. Like, don't do it. Okay, that is not how it should be going. Because again, things need to be properly accounted for. Because unfortunately, people who use money from ill-gotten means use real estate as a way to, cover themselves. And so, there are steps that have to be taken in order for it to be properly vetted that the money that you are bringing into the country are coming from legitimate sources, and that they're properly registered with SARS. So that's also a very important step to be aware of, that you need to do when purchasing a property. And then to the point about transferring funds, what I found out as we were going through the process is that, because again, this is a purely investment transaction, being purchased under a business entity, one of the things that I was told we needed to do and should do is create essentially a loan agreement between our US based entity and our South African based entity, that we are going to be transferring this amount of money for the purposes of purchasing a property. That way, when it is recorded by SARS, it's not looked at as income coming into the business entity in South Africa. It's actually a loan agreement for the sole purpose of purchasing a property. So that was one of the steps that you should be aware of, particularly if you are purchasing something from a purely business standpoint. Creating that loan agreement is important because, again, in the future, if we want to move those funds from South Africa back to the US, we have this loan agreement on record saying, okay, this amount of money can be transferred back, and it's looked at very differently from a tax standpoint because it's within a loan agreement and not just money just going back and forth. Okay. And so those are things that you have to just be aware of, and always, again, not only from a legal standpoint, but also from a tax standpoint, having those conversations with a tax specialist to understand what the tax implications are when you are purchasing, how you should purchase it, how it should be recorded. All of those things are important to, keep in mind, so that, you're not surprised when, this or that happens, because you're just not aware of the tax implications depending on how the transaction is structured. So that's also something that is important to be aware of.
And then the last thing I would say is that just making sure that you keep all of your documentation organized, because again, you don't want to end up, you know, getting letters from, the tax folks, or not being aware of certain tax liabilities because you didn't properly keep records or record things, in the right way. So it's important to keep everything, organized, structured. So we always like to leave you with 3 takeaways at the end of the video. Takeaway number 1 is location matters more than price, especially for first investments. We chose Sandton and Rosebank intentionally because of strong demand, walkability, infrastructure, and proximity to business districts that protect our downside and support consistent rental income. In South Africa, the right area will outperform a cheaper property in the wrong location every time. So, takeaway number 1, location matters more so than price. Takeaway number 2, buying real estate in South Africa as a foreigner is possible, but process matters. The opportunities are real, but success depends on understanding the full process, from reservations to timelines to legal protections, transfer costs, and management structures. When you take the time to learn the system and work, most importantly, with the right professionals, the risk drops and your confidence rises. So takeaway number 2 is you can buy real estate in South Africa as a foreigner, but the process matters. And then takeaway number 3 is real estate is not just an investment, it's a strategic tool for freedom. For us, these Johannesburg purchases aren't just properties that we're buying. They're part of a larger plan to build location-independent income, diversify globally, and design a life that gives our family more flexibility and choice. When real estate aligns with lifestyle and long-term vision, it becomes leverage, not just another asset. So again, it's important to understand that real estate, it's not just an investment. It is a tool that can be used to fund your freedom. I hope that you found some value in today's episode. This isn't just about buying property in South Africa. It's about building systems that support a life you actually want. And so this is our liberation journey. We appreciate you taking the time to share your comments, your encouragement are much appreciated. We wish you again a wonderful, blessed, happy New Year. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And also share this with someone who you think may benefit from this information that we have shared today. Until the next episode, we'll see you soon.